very vague comparison between solid-state drives and quote-unquote standard, conventional, not anymore, electromechanical spinning ladder hard drives. Solid-state drive versus hard drive. 25 cents per gigabyte to 50 cents per gigabyte for a solid-state drive. Hard drives are 5 cents to 10 cents a gigabyte. The speed, the utter speed of the thing. Solid-state drives can do 3 megabytes a second. They don't dick around by saying kilobits or some other obscure thing you're going to have to do a bunch of math for. Standard hard drives do about 200 to 300 megabytes a second is the average real-world outcome. We're not talking about anything else. They don't have to quibble. You get 3 gigabytes a second transfer on a solid-state drive. Shut up. The latency on the first start of read and write is about 1/10 of a millisecond. On a hard drive, it's about 10, 12 milliseconds to get to spin up and start doing it. If they use memory caches and all the other tricks, for both of them I might add, by using static RAM or whatever, to increase speed, reliability, sustained burst rate, read-write capabilities, or make it to where you don't have to wait for the equipment, they come out about the same speed, and that speed is not 3 gigabytes a second. They work out, oddly enough, right in the middle at around 1 to 2 gigabyte burst, because the hard drive is taking advantage of using static memory, which can go bizarrely fast compared to even SSDs, and use it as caching for reads and writes, and it just organizes it over time. As long as you don't have database rationalization issues, which you will have in a complex system, they have equivalent capabilities in some cases. But let's get to the differences again. The total real-world storage capacity, hard drives have been around a long time, is about 1.5 terabytes per square inch, or terabits. It doesn't matter. It's double that for a solid-state drive right now. They're both at the ends of what we can get away with. Now, the only way to increase it is to lie about what a bit or a byte is and store more information in the single cell for the solid-state drive by having it store more than one electrical value. This is a storage for 2 bits because you can have, let's say 4 voltage levels. That's only 2 bits. Every time you store double the number of bits stored in the single cell on a solid-state drive, you quadruple or double its failure rate. Don't do that. You can buy them that way. You can't change it back and forth unless it's a really hinky product. Don't do that. On a hard drive, there is an equivalent to doing it by using analog data recording on them, and nobody does that because of the same thing. It increases the failure rate unacceptably high. Solid-state drives don't show any fragmentation level effects, even if they're fragmented. And you want to leave them that way because you're not supposed to rewrite them a lot. They don't have a lot of durability. Hard drives, you can rewrite them all you want to, and they're very susceptible to fragmentation. But then again, they're so slow that you may not notice it. And again, if they use memory buffers, caches, or if you have your system set up like I do, to where it doesn't use the hard drive unless necessary, to where it doesn't know even that the computer's been turned off by accident, it tends to not affect performance. And you can just have a file system that just is told never to fragment a file. That's it. On solid-state drives, you have to let it fragment because it'll overwrite and rewrite the same area too many times and kill off the drive because one little section's overwritten too many times. Durability, as you might have understood. Solid-state hard drives, especially if you store more than 1 bit per electrical storage cell, have a ridiculously short lifespan for rewrite. If you're writing to them once and putting them away on a shelf as a storage medium, they last longer. Maybe. On hard drives, you can do it all you want. It doesn't really care. And if it starts going bad, you can still retrieve it because you can retrieve the non-binary, slightly analog, damaged data. How long can you store one as an archive, like I mentioned? It's 2 to 10 years, a lot of dynamic range on a solid-state drive. It depends on how well made it is. You get what you pay for at this point. Don't spend 25 cents a gig. Spend 50 or $1. Usability, though, if you just use them and rewrite them, let them rewrite themselves, let them upkeep themselves. They can last 10 years. 5 years is the durability line for them. 10 years is the max practical usage for casual usage. Hard drives. Worst case scenario is 5-year lifespan. That's not beating the hell out of them with a hammer, that's just using them a lot. And the storage duration, worst case scenario. Best case scenario is 20 years with 0% loss sitting on a shelf in my storage locker in an average storage unit. I've been doing this experiment for a long time. Every year I start the same hard drive. It was big at the time, so I think it was a 2 gig. God, I'm old. Actually, it's more than 20 years old. No, the damn things don't die. Thumb drives. I've been doing the same experiments on the first. Yes, I have my first thumb drive that was like, I think it was a 4 gig. Someone handed me an 8 gig memory module this big just a few days ago, just because it's funny. Solid state drives don't have to crap out either. It's the temperature range. Hard drives can be operated from freezing to human body temperature and from maximum of 10,000 to 40,000 feet unless they're sealed with helium or some other gas that's neutral. They don't like altitude changes. They don't like temperature changes, but you can store them. I mean, they don't care. As long as you don't have water condensation and as long as you let them cool down and heat up slowly. Thumb drives are a lot more durable. They can tolerate negative 40 degrees to positive 30 C, aka low body temperature. The hotter they are, the lower the life expectancy. They can handle any altitude because they don't have any pressure differential shit. Shock resistance. This is one thing I didn't know about. The rating for shock resistance for your average thumb drive or memory chip, just the memory chips, is the same as memory chips. You can fire them out of a fucking railgun, 1,000 Gs. Hard drives. Yes, I said that. Storage resistant on impact one time only, 350 G. Universally lethal impact for a human, the equivalent to being kicked in the head by a soccer ball player. Shock resistance running is 50 Gs. Lethal fall for a baby, and the max for a Tor missile launch. Yeah. What's Gs? Dropping a 350 G rated 3.5 inch hard drive based on its dimensions and weight is the equivalent to dropping it 35 feet and having it stop within 1.2 inches and still not exceed its budget of 350 Gs. If you drop it 6 foot onto a concrete floor and 9 feet if you drop it onto carpet or wood floor. And again, thumb drives, you can't drop them high enough for them to go to the speed that would damage them because the earth isn't that fucking big. Jupiter? Actually, yeah, you'd have to drop it into Jupiter to have it actually know the atmosphere statistics so it'd slow down. You'd have to drop it in a perfect vacuum onto a neutron star for it to break the damn thing. By the time it got close to the neutron star, it would actually be exceeding rating, unless it was a single chip, in which case mechanically it's small enough that it doesn't have the ability to have gravitational torsion and would survive all the way to the impact to a neutron star. One of these is not like the other. I used a bunch of sources for this, and don't consider this absolutely factual or even precise or even usable. Takeaways. Electromechanical hard drives are cheap per gigabyte and have a lot longer storage capacity under normal body temperature conditions. Thumb drives, as long as you don't read and write to them at a really high or really low temperature, are fine for that. And if you put them in lower temperature, you can store them a lot longer than they're supposed to be, but there's no guarantee and not really much history to them. Mechanical impact, if you have anything that's going to do vibration or impact, don't use them in electromechanical hard drive anymore. There's no reason to. Next, optimize your software and computer activities for not rewriting the hard drive very much, and SSD will very much outlive a standard hard drive. Just have an operating system that is aware of how to deal with solid-state drives. And let the solid-state drive do its own criterion management. Warning, thumb drives and anything other than something designed on purpose to do the purpose of a hard drive is not going to work the way a hard drive does. Unless you have the operating system manually controlling where it reads and writes data, memory management for hard drive space, so that it deliberately only writes to areas that it's never been written to before, you're going to have wear leveling problems and it will die fast. Data storage for archival purposes, again, if you keep them in cold storage, but normal body temperature usability, but lower than body temperature for operating, they're a little hinky. And again, for impact, you got to treat hard drives like a baby, literally. in every way possible. If you wouldn't do that to a baby, don't do that to your hard drive. We had a poster like that. Maxtor eventually said, now it's the devil baby. They actually had a devil baby poster. I had it for a while. Because they had hard drives that would tolerate negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit and upwards of boiling temperature. But they just made them really durable, and they sealed them up, and I didn't know what was in them, but they had helium gas in them. You want to use a gas that doesn't expand or contract much. I don't know if the helium was the best option. And again, G-force ratings don't mean much. Again, unless you kick a hard drive, if it's in storage, it's fine. But that's pretty close to the equivalent to dropping one 6 feet onto a concrete floor. So, store the hard drive on the bottom shelf in a cool environment, but not ice cold. Let it warm up and cool down slowly. And for thumb drives, I don't think it matters what you do to them. Just don't store them in a warm environment. Oh, and hard drives don't like being taken in high altitude, unless they're designed to, in which case, all they do is put them in a helium environment and then seal up that air hole. The vent hole just gets sealed up. That's all you got to do. And yeah, we did that. We would ship hard drives, and we could put them in they come in a static bag that's sealed for that reason. It can tolerate the air pressure change. Up to 18,000 feet was the rating. That's why it said that on the bag. So yeah, you could just Ziploc a hard drive. Last and most importantly, the more round of a shape you get, the better. This is my personal experience with memory chip clusters. A double-sided memory glob, we used to call it, had a square microchip, not very micro, about that big, on two sides of a circuit board. The ones that had it on both sides, evenly distributed temperature when it was soldered and everything like that, and a really tiny connector on it that looked a lot like an SD card slot connector. These were special purpose devices. Had almost zero failure rate. The one that had one chip on one side had a failure rate that was bad. Same thing with memory modules from the old days you'd slide into the computer. If they were double-sided, they had a lot less problems because they evenly heated the circuit board. If they're only on one side, they pull and push it, and they pop themselves apart. SSDs that you can buy that have chips on both sides of the circuit board, I would look for on purpose, and I would not have them in a case. I would have them what's called a case frame. That means it's a molded metal or plastic enclosure. I would recommend plastic, soft, mushy, mop bucket plastic, on both sides, molded to it. You can make a mold and have it hardened and then put bolts through it, nuts and bolts through it for durability, and have the connector recessed into it as much as possible. That would make it nearly impossible to destroy, universal, virtually universal, and just like hard drives, same thing. The hard drives can be put into a gummy case. As for heat removal, you put sheets of very conductive aluminum on them, about 1/16, 1/32 of an inch, and you make them separate, front and back, and that should do it for the chips. And for the hard drive, it's in a metal case in most cases, so you just have to make sure that that surface is exposed. And if you need to worry about heat removal, you put a heatsink on it and have the vanes oriented which way the wind's going to go on it. And again, if you want to take these into high altitude, this is for ballooning people and stuff like that. This is actually something I already looked into. They just tape them shut temporarily. They just keep them at atmospheric pressure because they need air. They rely on air inside of them to create the Bernoulli effect, where the mechanical heads float just above the surface. If it doesn't have air pressure, it can't work. But if you can, you just get a solid-state drive, and if you don't care about it too much, you get the cheap one. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. Hope this has been useful. What I say is not relevant. What is relevant is the links below in the description. And the conclusion is, unless you have to put it through hell, your cheapest hard drive is going to be an electromechanical. But if you have to put it through hell, don't use electromechanical hard drives anymore. They're not a practical option anymore. As long as it's a modern operating system that's SSD aware, you're good. Bye.